Hey everyone, Rushlock here with our next episode of Eva Gauntlet coverage from Rixx Javix. As always, if you're enjoying the series, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the like button, and leave us a comment with your feedback on the article. This one titled Captured Inclusion. Inclusion, the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure. Over the past decade, my advocacy for piracy inside of EVE Online has centered around a general theme, an attempt on my part to keep our little niche group of players top of mind in the conversation and part of the forward momentum of development. In those years, it was often challenging to achieve this, naturally, as our numbers are pale in comparison to other areas of interest. We're not as newsworthy as nullsec, or as easy to define as highsec, nor as weirdly specific as wormhole space. Until recently, lowsec was devoid of development resources, slowly gathering dust in the corner, which frankly just helped add to our sense of identity. Until Uprising. There can be no doubt that the recent changes, upgrades, enhancements to factional warfare have been good for lowsec and for us pirates. It strangely remains odd that our role within that ecosystem has largely remained unchanged. What I've been spending so much time writing about these past months is largely just a question I think needs answered. Is there a more integrated role for pirates in lowsec space, or should we just continue our role as is? So the first thing I want to touch on is equating lowsec and faction warfare space. Pedantically, yes, Rush, faction warfare space is lowsec. It's true. It's part of lowsec. But there's also lowsec that has nothing to do with faction warfare. As a quick aside and a what if non-faction warfare lowsec started having interactions between the Empire that's established there and or the rats that are established there, the NPCs, the actual pirate NPC factions? What if a faction warfare brewed between players and NPCs for those regions with some, not necessarily all, but some similar mechanics between that and faction warfare we see between the empires? Would that allow player pirates entities to then choose and pick where they want to side with the, even if in a mercenary role, side with pirate NPC organizations? I don't mean join necessarily, not lose their own corp identity, but align with NPC pirate factions to then affect their actions and activities towards objectives that are counter to and harmful to the Empire entities that are in those non-faction warfare low sec spaces. But again, the point of that is to differentiate between current faction warfare low sec and non-faction warfare lowsec, and trying to make sure that there's, going forward in the conversation, there's not confusion there into groups that identify as lowsec pirates having some sort of, faction warfare space got some attention, shiny polish, what's there for us? It isn't that there can't be anything there, it's that there should be a muted expectation, if any expectation at all, towards that anticipation, I guess. As the CEO of Stay Frosty, my role is to always worry about things. How do we attract recruits when joining a militia is so easy and obviously rewarding? How do we avoid stagnation? How do I help increase inclusion and involvement for my pilots? And while we long ago accepted our roles and our fate by choosing this play style over others, is there more to it that could help us achieve all of those goals? There are a lot of questions there, and none of them need answered. We could just motor on as is and let things play out. This is the sandbox, after all. We could do that. Or we could admit that there seem to be obvious answers available. One I would like to throw forward, an oversimplification, would be Vinny and the Wormhole Police. The playstyle, the interaction. It doesn't need heavy RP. Heavy RP can be opted into, but the idea is sitting down and deciding, look, the game is not designed for my content. Rick seems pretty aware of that. So what tools can I use, and how can I make it more enticing to a not necessarily a broader range of people? You're not trying to convert people that don't already appreciate the context or the concept of your gameplay enjoyment, but more, how do you make it more visible? How do you make it have a higher visibility range to the people who would be already predisposed toward enjoying this approach being piracy? And I think that if Rixx can find someone it doesn't have to be someone, right? Like Rixx already has a full plate, but if Rixx can find somebody who shares the passion for this piracy angle to become its Vinny, and I'm using Vinny as a placeholder, as a concept, as a shortcut to communicate an idea. Rixx may have no awareness or familiarity with Vinny's work. You listening right now may not. So check out some YouTube videos, check out some live streams of Vinny's channel, check out his Discord, and you'll get an idea that Vinny is the chief of the Wormhole Police. Is Vinny out there getting, top kill mails every single week for the Wormhole Police? Maybe, maybe not. That isn't the point. It's that he helps organize, facilitate, and develops the, not necessarily urgency, but enthusiasm is probably the right word. He has an embodiment, an enthusiasm towards their style of gameplay. And I think Rixx could find somebody to fill that niche within trying to be like an ambassador, maybe might be a good word, toward folks getting into that pirate life. And I think by having it done that way, it doesn't have to be streamed, it doesn't have to be YouTubed. Vinny's media content creation just puts it on display. And this piracy idea could be done through in-game chat channels exclusively, or blog posts, or whatever format wanted to be the platform for it. But that would be a great way to be able to spotlight it and draw attention to it and showcase it in a way that will entice others to come check it out. But yeah, let me get back to the article here. Let's see. How do we attract recruits? This is what put me into that line of thought, by the way. How do we avoid stagnation, growth? How do I help increase inclusion? That's what I was thinking there. Interaction. Interaction is huge. Currently, my perception of Rixx's usual activity is solo or small gang, warp, 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 click, 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 warp, warp, warp. Try to catch people, right? But trying to chase them down. I don't know how often, because I don't know enough about the activity, how often Rixx and company or pirates in general, are ahead of the prey. They're how often are they? I don't mean necessarily gate camping, but how often are they using intel and communicating with each other in different locations? Hey, I just missed a such and such in this location. Might be heading your way. Things like that. I don't know if that happens or not. It might just be more independent, solo, or very small group actions that don't. They share stories and game theory and knowledge, but maybe they don't coordinate as much. I don't have any insights on that. Let's see. Okay. And this is when I start thinking that there should be more to it. The other day, Phoenix and I slid into a medium advanced faction warfare plex that had a VNI in it. We were in frigates. He had been running the site for about 20 minutes prior to us arriving. He ran off and docked up before we could even slid into the plex. Correct. Absolutely true. And this will, I presume, be the common occurrence. Not will be, but has been, and probably forever will be, unless something dramatic changed, right? He had about 2 minutes left on the site to finish it, so we decided to hold up and hope he returned. This is what's called optimism. I'm a very cynical person, right? Now, I could see maybe sitting around for 2 or 3 minutes to see, and that would burn the absolute maximum of my patience. In all, we waited about 15 minutes. That was 2 minutes well spent and about 13 minutes to process your denial, right? That guy wasn't coming back. But Rush, we were in frigates, and he was in a VNI. That is completely irrelevant. Why was that nerd on that site in a VNI? Because the site would run itself. He was in a big Tristan. He was a PvEer, not a PvPer. But Rush is in faction warfare space. Doesn't matter. Faction warfare space, I can't speak for the past, but certainly the current is no longer PvP-centric space. It is PvP and PvE inclusive. It tries to give people different backgrounds, different things to do, and different ways to interact with the war zone and the war effort. That short point being made, that nerd was never there for a fight, period, the end. And there's absolutely no way and no relevance that you and Phoenix were there in frigates. This guy was never going to fight you. From my perspective, I don't know the person, I don't know their motivations, but it wouldn't have taken me 15 minutes to realize he ain't coming back. Every so often he would undock, descan for us, dock back up again. Eventually we got bored, moved on. I'm sure he undocked and finished the site afterwards. Absolutely. Why wouldn't he, right? There's absolutely no incentive for him to come back to that site while you guys are in local. This is just one of dozens of examples I could present. But I think this one simplifies the issue for us pirates well. It is. It's a great example. It's easy to present as a simple scenario. There's no obscured moving parts to it, like nerd crabbing timer. Was not fully AFK enough not to notice you guys hit local. F'd off. Stayed F'd off until you left, and then you're right. Probably went back and finished the site. That's because of user behavior. And that user behavior is not going to change. Period. The end. They can't put a carrot, they being CCP, they cannot put a carrot big enough on that site to make them go, you know what? They're just in frigates. That carrot doesn't exist. Because again, we're not going to change the nature of that VNI pilot. That VNI pilot was there for a reason. That reason was interrupted or mitigated or removed or whatever. And that person in any scenario is always going to leave and not return. Period. Right? Just like nothing would change the nature of Rixx and Phoenix in this scenario to then like, well, shucks, this one got away. This game's horrible. We hate it. The end. We quit. Right? That's not going to happen either. We're not able to change and convert user behavior from one line of play to another. Speaking in generality, will there be exceptions to that? Of course, but the exception isn't relevant. We're talking about the general rule here. This is just one of dozens of examples I could present, but this one simplifies the issue for us pirates well. We have no tools, no role within that environment to affect anything. Correct. Because it is faction warfare space. It is not pirate warfare space. And maybe that's what needs to be created. There's faction warfare, right, between the empires. I guess faction doesn't have to be limited to empires. It could be broadened to what I spoke about earlier in this video about what if there's faction pirates warfare, and that could be developed in that direction. Pilots can simply run away and wait. Correct, because there's absolutely no reason not to. And an argument might be made like, well, what about if we make it like an ESS website where once you punch into a plex, you're on that plex as long as you're in a bubble. Like, okay, well, I'm just going to go sit on the edge of the bubble now, right? That's a quick play. Well, what if you punch into the room and it's like abyssal space? There is no warp out option. You're in there for the timer until the end. In that scenario, you will see a dramatic drop in people running sites. And if you think it's slim pickings now, incorporate that system and see it become even more of a barren wasteland. Pilots and players and users will not change their behavior, generally speaking. They will do the path of least resistance, which is disengage. They will simply just not do. There is little incentive for them to do otherwise, that's right. And little we can do to encourage alternate choices, also true. The only solution, which is obvious, is to join a militia. This is reminiscent, or what's fresh in my mind is a conversation that was happening on the Discord partnership the other night, which is like, hey, gee, I wish we had rewards for doing those sites. And it's like, you do. You just have to join a militia. Well, we're not going to do that. Completely understandable, right? But then that, like, as soon as we laugh off the nonsensical idea of joining a militia as pirate players, it's also as equally nonsensical to then desire reward, right? And yet that is completely counter to the entire point. Doing so would eliminate half our potential targets, and we would essentially no longer be pirates. That's true. That's very, very true. If you want to eliminate 99% of your targets, go back to that idea of changing sites to ESSs or abyssals and trying to tether people in there. It'll never play out that way. The solution is to abandon our identity. Hopefully not, right? That is not a solution. And so I keep writing words and suggesting alternative ways of thinking. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I might even have any good answers. What I do know is this. It doesn't seem to be that challenging to imagine a system in which we could potentially have more inclusion in this environment. I think we're too stuck on the idea of it being this environment. I want to bring, or I would like to see, CCP deliver on what they've already stated as their goal, which is to bring elements of the current faction warfare revamp to other space. That's what I think is the more realistic approach. If and when that'll happen, who knows, right? We got the Uprising expansion. Viridian just happened, and we don't know anything about the prioritization of the next expansion, right? Let's see. Okay. Go ahead and run away, but I'm going to steal your Plex, this part's fine, from you and grab the LP for myself. Absolutely not, because you're a pirate. You can't have LP because LP are loyalty points, and you're not loyal to any of the empires, so you can't have it. That's just the nature of the system. Now, would that be piracy? Wouldn't it? No, not at all. You suckling at the teat of the empire would equally be non-piracy, right? The LP is not a tangible item. The push on the tug of war mechanic of the system is not pertinent to anyone outside the militias, right? But we could campaign for the idea of and you have to put everything through the lens of how will players abuse this, right? But what if there's faction warfare, tug of war in two different directions, side A and side B? What if pirates could destabilize in some way? And I don't know what that would be. But what if pirate players could do something in systems that would cause invasions or FOBs or like, I'm not saying any of these are good ideas, but I'm trying to give them as placeholder concepts to where what if the pirate players could encourage NPC pirate spikes in activity, which would disrupt faction warfare player activity in some manner. That's a very, very broad what's the word when you do like the basis of an idea, but that's what I'm looking at. Like, I don't have any hard solution for it, but what if that were a thing? To me, that makes more sense aesthetically, mechanically, than any scenario where unaligned pilots would get any aligned rewards, right? And then would that encourage the individual pilots to stay on a grid longer? Probably not, because they're individual, right? But it could encourage more small gang activity, which isn't the goal of the solo PvP pilot. But I'll say the quiet part out loud again, Rixx. This game is not designed for solo PvP. Solo PvPers either go into it already acknowledging that they're in a bad spot from moment one and will stay that way, and that nobody. Oh, that's the part we're not supposed to say out loud. Nobody in Eve, generally speaking, is looking for the good fight, right? Or they are looking for the good fight, and the good fight to them is the fight that they're probably going to win. That's what the good fight is. Maybe many wouldn't acknowledge that or admit it, but that's the reality of it. Are there exceptions to that rule? Absolutely. Does it change the rule? Not one bit. Most nerds are not looking for a good fight. Even go back to Phoenix and Rixx looking at that VNI and their frigates. You know what? Those frigates were going to dunk the bejesus out of that VNI if they caught it. You would have had a lot of fun. You would have enjoyed yourselves. That person may or may not have cared about the VNI loss. Doesn't matter. It was never going to be good fight in terms of could go either way, right? We could argue that what if that VNI pilot were actually an accomplished PvPer and knew what they were doing, right? But they weren't, and they didn't. They knew the only one important part they needed to worry about, which was call drones in and warp off. And that's how you knew immediately that person wasn't going to be anything. You could have maybe during that 15 minutes thought, okay, well maybe they're reshipping and going to bring us some contents. You know, that might have been a valid reason to stick around. But if you saw them undocking and descanning in the same ship, you know, they weren't coming back. But yeah, the point of that one was, that tangent was, those two frigates weren't looking for the good fight. They were looking for, let's catch that little crab and pluck its arms off, legs off. And if you stumbled into a good fight because of it, that's the part that probably also needs to be mentioned is, I think you two would have been ecstatic had the VNI stayed on grid, managed the fight well, right, and actually gave you a run for your money. Let's make sure to put that narrative in there too. I think you two would have been extremely pleased and happy with either result, between killing it or getting dunked, and either which way that went. And you would have been less happy had it just, you know, fell over and died to you through very little effort on your part. So that wouldn't have been as satisfying or rewarding, but it would have felt better than it warping off and sitting in the system for 15 minutes, right? So until then, we will just continue to be pirates, and that is just fine with us. Yar! Hope you enjoyed this reading, and we'll see you all in the next one.